Welcome, ladies, gentlemen. I am here with Jonty, who is our Labour candidate, and very lucky. We've got the privileged opportunity to ask her some lovely questions. Look at that, fan favourite right over there. That's it. Anya, why you think that Labor should continue to stay in power?
Yeah, that's a really fantastic question. Hi guys, I'm Jonty Bush. I'm the state member for Cooper and I am part of Stephen Miles's Labor team here in Queensland. This has been my first term of government and it has been such an incredible privilege to serve. I came from a really strong charity and community background, so the ability to continue that in Parliament has been phenomenal. Of course, I'm going to say that Stephen Miles and the Labor team should be re-elected. There is so much at stake at this election. In the last term, and actually even in the last 10 months that Stephen Miles has been our Premier, so much has happened. We've got our energy and jobs plan, a plan to transition Queensland away from fossil fuel energy into renewables, underpinned by a jobs guarantee. We've got our housing plan to build 1 million homes by 2046. Women's rights is obviously a big issue for us in this election, and we have a plan to make sure that our right to choose remains protected. And of course, treaty and truth-telling is something that the Liberals have already said that they're going to wind back in their first 100 days. So there's a lot of big issues at stake at this election, and we're asking for another term to make sure those rights and interests are protected and upheld.
Beautiful. Oh, that was perfect. Thank you very much. Alrighty, well, are you ready for some questions then?
Yeah, I love that.
All right. Well, as you've heard, I'm sure about the LNP policy, they're very, very hard on crime.
Yeah.
How well do you think the Labor Party influences young people in crime?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's always interesting when we talk about the LNP going hard on crime. I like to talk about what's effective when we're looking at crime. Of course, nothing kind of happens in this vacuum. There's a whole bunch of reasons why people commit crimes, and I think it's also worth pointing out that young people make up 8% of total offending population. So it's actually adults that commit the most crimes in Queensland, particularly the most personal offences. The overwhelming majority of crime in Queensland is domestic and family violence, but we don't hear the Liberal National Party talking about that, disappointingly. So they focus quite hard on young people. Now, the solution for young people is looking at why are they committing these crimes in the first time. And often it is undiagnosed disability and mental health strains and stresses, broken homes, trauma at home, housing and homelessness issues, disengagement with school, not feeling connected to really good peers and connections. So it's a range of reasons why. Now, that doesn't excuse the fact that they have committed a crime, but it gives us really strong clues about the types of things we should be investing in to keep them from committing further crimes. Locking more children up for longer periods has a short-term effect. It takes them off the streets, absolutely. But in the long term, it makes them harder, more angrier criminals and adds to that adult criminal population. So we need to pull that back, and that's what the Labor Party is about, early intervention.
Yeah, that to me makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
You're just kind of continuing the cycle by locking them up and making them angry. And
Yeah.
I would say abject poverty is what pushes most people to crime. Those who have, moralistic tendencies to swing, I guess, if you're
Yeah.
doing it out of desperation.
And look,
It's very, very easy to be on your moral high horse when you're in a privileged situation.
Absolutely, and sorry to cut you off.
No,
but,
no, please.
Yeah, no, and the most, we've done a lot of things around decriminalising, poverty-related offences. So only recently we decriminalised sex work, which was still a crime.
That is a huge thing for us.
That was a massive thing for us as a Labor
really
Party.
back that.
Absolutely. We decriminalised poverty offences around public urination and begging, which was still a crime in Queensland, unbelievably. So in this time of government, we've done a lot in that space, decriminalising some drug types and looking at drug diversion programs. So that's the kind of work we want to have, people's, support to continue.
I think that's an incredibly good answer, and I do believe that would help crime far more than just punishing them. That doesn't really stop the problem, does it? Alrighty, so environmental. Is it true that Labor has a plan for renewable energy?
It is true. Heard it here first. No, it's pretty old news. We do. So obviously a big part of what we're doing is looking at how do we decarbonise Queensland. So the Energy and Jobs Plan was released, I think, about a year or two ago. Really significant body of work that, again, Premier Stephen Miles was working on with Minister de Brenny. So looking at how do we close down our coal-fired power stations and turn them into renewable energy zones and renewable energy hubs. Gosh, say that 3 times quickly. So we've got a plan to do do that. I think by 2030 they will be all coal-fired power stations will be closed down, and we will be looking at broad-scale solar and wind. The McIntyre wind farm is fantastic. I had the privilege of taking some students from our local area out there recently. It's only about 2 hours out of Brisbane. The largest onshore wind-powered station right here in Queensland, in the whole southern hemisphere, right here in Queensland. So a lot to really celebrate. Now the good thing about that plan is we've socialised it with communities, because obviously, you know, I can sit down here in Cooper and say we need to shut down all coal and gas, but how people feel in the regions is really different. There are some communities that feel really wedded to that industry, and so taking them on that journey, absolutely, and guaranteeing them that there'll be no job losses and that energy will be affordable, I think is a big part of that. So this plan has done all those things, and importantly, it's underwritten, it's got a jobs guarantee as part of that, so no job losses, which is really important for our workers.
How do you guarantee no job losses? Are they going to go on a renewable or? Yeah,
so obviously there's transition plans in place, and some of those people might stay in the energy market looking at renewables. Others might transition to something different. Some communities might look at, you know, agriculture or other industries, and I think that's kind of part of the plan. We've invested a lot in manufacturing and trying to really revitalise our manufacturing industry here in Queensland. So looking at where are the jobs coming from? Where are the jobs of the future?
Right, so the idea is to establish jobs and then move them from coal into more...
Yeah, absolutely, just transitioning those industries so that people can find jobs for the future and still have, you know, a comparable pay as well, and still have comparable conditions, but in the jobs industries that we know there's a market for. At the end of the day, you know, communities are getting out of coal. You know, that's the reality. So, you know, we need to get out of that.
Industry.
For a number of reasons. We want to, you know, we want to get out of that space. And so having a good plan so that people have the confidence to transition, because what we actually need is a stable government, right? To do these things, you need, you know, governments that can hold government for a decent period of time so that these plans, which sometimes take a decade to do, are actually implemented. If the LNP get in at this election, they have said they are going to tear up our emissions reductions targets. They're not committing to the pumped hydro. So we know that either will take things backwards, or it will certainly spook investors and spook industries. So.
And remove the tax cuts.
Absolutely.
This is tax cuts to mining owners, you know, offshore's profits, people.
Yeah, well, and you're absolutely right. We implemented the royalty scheme, $9 billion a year that royalty scheme gives us, so we can do things like 50-cent fares.
That's what's paying for it, ladies and gentlemen. We actually finally managed to tax the coal mines. And yep, Labor's spending a lot, but we can afford it. Or I shouldn't say we, but Labor. Labor can afford it because they're finally, after 10 years, they're taxing. Definitely, a proud moment as far as I'm concerned. Alrighty, so some harder hitting questions. We've got cost of living here.
Yeah.
So the Greens have stated in their little booklet that school funding under Labor has been underfunded by $1.7 billion. Do you know where they got this figure?
I don't know where that figure comes from. I don't know where they get half of their figures from,
Fair
to be
enough.
honest. I think a lot of it is conflated, and you know, they often don't have references for a lot of the things that are put out there. You know, we're really proud of a public education system that we have built. Our public education system has been built on successive Labor governments. While the LNP have removed schools, closed down schools and cut teachers' conditions, we have built all that back up again. We're building more schools than ever before, and we're investing heavily into the services that matter, not just the curriculum, but things like GPs in every public school now is being rolled out. Like having access to a GP in your school is so important. Access to psychologists in school. The Gap State High School is a phenomenal public high school. The stuff they're doing up there, the resources they've got is amazing, and I've just managed to secure another $15 million for a brand new library up there. It's a fantastic announcement. It's going to be a new library for that school community, but designed in a way that opens it up to the community. So it's conditioned on the idea that the community will be able to use it, which makes it a broader community space. So thinking that stuff through around how do we invest more in our schools, but actually, you know, open them up and make them a bit more of a community hub.
That's perfect. And also, have you heard about the proposal to give school lunches to...
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so that's obviously the new announcement that we've got now. And I think it's a really good one. So funding all school lunches in public schools, a universal school lunch program. We know a lot of children come to school and they're underfed or they're hungry, and that absolutely affects, the way that they are learning and studying, their attendance rates. So again, links back into that crime stuff that we were talking about and engagement. So it shows you it's not just about the curriculum, it's about how do we better support young people. So it is a great announcement. Obviously there's some working through in terms of, kitchens and tuck shops and who's delivering these services, but and not every parent might take it up, but at least it's an option that's there for us. And especially if you're a busy working parent, sometimes it's not the dollars, it's just taking that anxiety, that one additional thing out of an already busy day. I've got 4 kids. I know what it's like to prepare 4 sets of lunches. It's hectic and costly. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, bringing on to that, so can you list some things that the Labor Party has implemented to bring down the cost of living, not just lunches in schools, but more broader termed?
Yeah, look, cost of living I think has been Stephen Miles' big focus. So he's probably most known for the 50-cent fares, which has been phenomenal. And every single day I'm hearing from people about how that has not just saved their money, but actually got people back onto public transport, which is getting, our cars off the road, which is great for congestion, great for emissions reductions, great for, in turn, pulling back on vehicle manufacturing and supply, which is about steel, which is about coal. So all those things are fantastic initiatives. So 50-cent fares, $1,000 energy rebate off all households. So for every household, there's $1,000 credit on their energy bill. Energy bills are one of the biggest costs that we have,
isn't it?
As a home. So that's a huge thing. 20% discount on all car, boat, bike registrations, which is fantastic. We also were looking at fair play vouchers, so vouchers for kids who are going into sports, which is phenomenal. Free kindy, free TAFE, free apprenticeships, $1,000 rebate off tools for tradies, trying to really build that construction industry back up. It's not just about more houses, it's about more workers. There's never been more money in the housing sector, it's about getting the workers. So that's just some of the stuff we've been doing in the 10 months that Stephen Miles has been Premier.
Wow, that is actually some pretty impressive groundwork, and I really don't think Labor gets enough credit for that. $1,000 off your energy bill, that's a big one.
It is huge.
And I will say the 50-cent fare, even the LNP are saying that they're going to hold on to that. That's how good of an idea it was. Greens, of course, backing. Definitely think that you guys should be very proud of how much work you guys have done in those fields. Alrighty. Another one that the Greens are trying to stand up against, and I believe that they should too, land banking by private-owned developers. Do you have any policies in place to try and stop that?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure what the policy is on that, but I do agree. That's something I'm more than happy to advocate for in this community. We do see that here where developers are holding on to properties and really need to be forced to either bring them into the market or to sell them. So, yeah, look, that's definitely an issue, something more than happy to advocate and to work on. We've looked at, I think the policy for us has been looking at how do we kind of, incentivise it and make it easier for developers to do something with it. So how do we kind of work with them around approvals or look at infrastructure investments so that if they bring those developments into the market, can we help with footpaths and parks to try to incentivise people to release? That's been part of the Homes for Queenslanders plan. But, I do agree there needs to be kind of the stick approach as well, a bit of a carrot and a bit of a stick.
I do also agree. Another very interesting point the Greens made with that. Have you guys ever considered government-owned developers?
Yeah, well, we've got QBuild. So QBuild is already a government-owned builder. So again, the LNP, I can't remember how many jobs they cut in QBuild and really tore that back, but that's exactly what QBuild is doing, and so they are bringing those homes into the market, absolutely. We're also doing things like we did a really interesting legislation change around state facilitated development approvals. So the biggest issue we have is about the time that it takes to get a development approved. So, to be quite frank, what I notice in this role is there's not an issue with developments. There's developers making DAs all the time. But what happens is the minute a DA goes live, I would have 100 people walk in my office and say, Jonty, we don't want that medium rise, townhouse block going ahead because we want it to be green space, it's going to block my views, or there's not enough public transport. And, they might all be real and pressing issues, but at the end of the day, housing is a basic right and it's a human right, and housing is what we need. So the greatest issue I see is probably, working with communities to get more comfortable with gentle densification, and I think that's probably the work of government. So how do we actually work with developers to do that in a way that people are comfortable? But the state facilitated development application process basically means that if you have a development, a development ready to go and it's got caught up in local government planning and not been approved, and it meets the criteria including housing diversity and inclusionary planning, so a minimum percentage of affordable housing in that DA application, the state will actually greenlight that potentially to go ahead. So that's a really interesting one as well around trying to, the government intervening and bringing these things on.
Oh, very, very good answers, and glad to hear that. So that was established by the Labor Party.
It was, That was about in the last 12 months of in the last 12 months of government.
One more amazing achievement that we just don't hear enough of.
I know, right?
Not enough of. Alrighty. So lastly, when it comes to housing, there is an incredibly nasty bubble, depending on what angle. Nasty for us, great for homeowners. Brought about by negative gearing. Do you have an opinion on negative gearing? And is there any policies that you plan to do anything about negative gearing?
Well, look, I think negative gearing typically kind of falls into the federal sphere, and of course Bill Shorten took that to an election and lost on that issue. But look, that said, I think it is a different time, so I think we need to look at everything that we can. I appreciate, there are people out there who are using homes as investments, and I appreciate also that, for a robust rental market, there does need to be, investors and landlords. That's the other end of that equation. But housing is a right, and people have the right to home ownership, and that should absolutely be the focus and the priority of all governments.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially if you're going, because, the generations, well, they're coming up.
Absolutely.
They're not just the kids that don't vote anymore. We want somewhere to live.
Well, and everything attaches to it. Crime, prosperity, work, livability, community, social cohesion, social inclusion. That all starts with having a stable home.
100%, 100%.
Put your roots down and start a family and contribute to a community. You can't do that if you're moving. Every 6 months because your rent's not stable. So that absolutely needs to be the priority. So you'll never see me blocking housing. I am absolutely, more supply, more supply, more supply.
Yeah, you're entirely right. And if people aren't starting families, then retirement is going to be hard for every next generation that's coming in.
Look, and that's the other interesting thing is about, having enough, having the housing diversity, places for people to right size or downsize to. So after people have finished their families, what I see in this community is there's not enough smaller, like 1 or 2 bedroom apartments in the Gap or Ashgrove, for example. They want to stay in the Gap and Ashgrove, but there's nowhere really to move back into. So that housing diversity piece, I think, is really, really critical.
I completely 100% agree. So if that's the case, why do you think it's important for first home buyers or renters to vote Labor over LNP?
Yeah, great question. Well, we've done a lot in the housing market. Like I said, we've got a Homes for Queenslanders plan. It's a plan to build 1 million homes by 2046. So it's the biggest investment we've seen of any government. And it's really important that work is able to continue. We've made a good head start on it, but we have to continue it. We've looked at really innovative models of housing, including purchasing nursing homes, purchasing some hotels and motels and turning that into crisis accommodation and medium-term secure accommodation for people who, for example, are fleeing domestic and family violence. But we need to make sure we've got the right types of homes for people, like people with a disability who need, a particular style of home or particular supports put in place. So having that housing diversity is so important. We've removed the threshold lowered the threshold for stamp duty, increased the first homeowners grant. So doing a lot to try to make sure that there's more homes, more affordable homes in places where people want to live. Not just that piece, but the infrastructure. So we're also funding local governments to look at the infrastructure that sits around some of these dwellings. So are there enough footpaths, bike paths, parks? So looking at all that stuff. It's not just about housing, it's about building societies, building communities.
It's interesting too that you bring up removing stamp duty for first home buyers, because I think that might be an LNP promise as well, something that's already been done.
So they are looking at that space as well, and obviously that's something that they're saying. I guess what I would say is we've probably got more of a comprehensive package, and we're looking at the whole range of the spectrum. They are focusing on home ownership, as are we, but we're also looking at things like, you know, community housing, social and affordable housing. We know where the LNP we're in last time, social and affordable housing actually went backwards under the LNP. So, and we had to rebuild that stock and then add to that. So, you know, we're looking at that whole kind of spectrum of housing, from getting people into homes to keeping them in their homes, and then helping them when they are facing housing stress. Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I'd just like to leave you on this last one here. I've got a little bit of an article here.
Yeah.
So it says here that 1% actually own nearly a quarter of all property investments across Australia. And so we're looking at 7% of property investors have 6 or more properties, and that accounts for over 25% of all property investments in Australia.
Yeah.
So look, I might just be some crazy person, but
Crazy people.
all right, well, get ready for my crazy shook up idea. What about you can't own more than 5 properties?
Yeah.
Because if you couldn't own more than 5 properties, then that would be immediately 200,000 houses
Back in the market.
straight into the market. If you could take it to 4, that's minimum 400,000, and that's only if they have 6.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, there's
Yeah.
probably quite a few of them with hundreds.
Yeah, well, and I've said that, you know, that is certainly my view, that, you know, I think housing is a human right. And at the end of the day, you know, we do need some landlords, because there is going to be some degree of rentals, but you're 100% right. If we can look at how do we turn over some of that stock into the, you know, market for people to purchase and get into their own home, I don't think that's a crazy idea at all.
Well, if you don't think it's a crazy idea, I would love to find any party that is willing to adopt that policy, and I will follow them to the ends of the earth, because I think it is a very simple solution to break up very easy anti-monopoly laws. It's just a very scary thing to do, because they're the people with the power and the money.
Yeah, well, certainly happy to see what happens after Saturday. More than happy to sit down and have that conversation with you 100%.
All right, well, it's on camera, and I'm going to hold you to that now.
Done.
Perfect. Beautiful. Thank you very much, Jonty. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.